Mayor Michelle Wu, local officials, and community leaders held a press conference on Tuesday about combating crime in Boston. The leaders came together to discuss the mental health crisis due to COVID and violence prevention programs, given the growing trend of youth violence in the city. Wu said young people are beginning to have more access to weapons and are becoming more involved with gun incidents on the streets. This conversation comes after 3 people were fatally shot over the weekend, according to city police.
Of violence in Boston. As many know, that our church has hosted many homicide funerals over the years, and we're still outraged. We're outraged at the fact that there's an uptick in violence. We're outraged at the fact that people are trying to put a spin and a twist on things. We can't politicize this, and we cannot ignore it away. It's painful. We know some of the families are involved who have to deal with the painful reality of their loved one loss. And so we're not here pointing fingers. We're here trying to connect, strategize, and like I said, it's a series of meetings that should be forthcoming in connection with this particular meeting here. But my heart is warmed at the fact that we have so many people from different sectors of our community that are concerned about the uptick in violence and determined to make a difference. So we have the mayor is here. We have our police commissioner here. We have our DA that's here. We also have the superintendent of schools. She's here as well because, as you know, we've had an uptick in violence in the schools also. So, you know, we're not here to antagonize anyone. You can ask questions. They answer your question. But I just want to say, as the senior pastor here, we have to work together in all sectors of our community to do what we can do to curtail the violence. But we are outraged. We feel the pain of the families involved, and we know some of the people are involved, and we can do better as a city. So it's up to us to make sure we hold each other accountable. So with that, how do you want, what order you want to go? We'll just pop in. Okay, we just go whatever order that they want to go. God bless you.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you so much to Bishop Dickerson for hosting us today for a really deep conversation with community members and leaders from the faith community and in elected office and in various other roles who have been involved for a long time in pushing for that vision of Boston that includes every single one of our young people and has the opportunities that we all deserve and peace and safety in our neighborhoods. I'm really grateful to be working alongside so many incredible staff within the city of Boston, partners at other levels, and community members who are ready to go. We talked about a number of threads of what people are experiencing right now in the neighborhoods and what needs have been identified, what areas of action are already taking place in different corners that we can tie together and coordinate and work even more fully towards. There was a lot of conversation around trauma response and the need to ensure that we are touching every single person, every student who might be at all impacted by recent events, or community members or parishioners and members of the faith community who have connections, because Boston is a small city where people know each other, and every single incident affects so many in our communities. We talked about mental health and the rise and urgency and depth of need that is spilling over into many of the ways that we're interacting with each other and seeing play out in our schools and at subway stations and in every space. We talked about violence prevention and intervention and the efforts that are already happening on the ground in community, and how city efforts and our Boston Public Health Commission, some of the convenings and conversations that are moving forward around really defining a plan for next summer and continuing to build on the work that's happening today. All those pieces can be pulled together. And we discussed the need for schools to have a central part of this. The efforts that I think in some ways were, we had seen not receive as much attention or investment during the years of the pandemic, because there was just dropping everything to make sure students and families were fed and safe and had the resources they need to battle a new virus and that global health pandemic. as we are now settling a little bit, obviously COVID is still with us, but as we are now moving towards a recovery from the pandemic, really ensuring that we are reinvigorating and putting back together all of the supports that we know, student by student, school by school, classroom by classroom, how we can all have a part in wrapping around each one of our young people and our families, because the mental health epidemic that is in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic is certainly here with us. And so I am encouraged by the partnerships that we strengthened today, and eager to move with urgency with all of our community partners in taking on the work ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. We had a very, I would say, good and productive meeting earlier. A lot of frank discussion, transparency, talking about how we go forward to address what many see as a surge in violent crime, and it is real. We're not diminishing that by any stretch of the imagination. We're going to address those perceptions, and address those concerns, and address those fears, while also recognizing that Boston is at a very key crossroads right now, where we're still bucking the trends of many other major cities. And so what I said in that meeting and what I'm saying here now is that we have an opportunity, a real opportunity before us, to do many things that we've done well here in Boston for so long, that may have us at a place where, despite the recent surge, that violent crime is in a relatively good space. And that is that we have done intervention and prevention in this city well. We've been heralded for it. We've done returning citizens and programs for them very well. We've been recognized and heralded for that. We've done alternatives to prosecution well and recognized for that. Community policing and prosecution well and been recognized for that. But I'm not sure we've ever done, and I could be wrong, but I'm not sure we've ever done them all well at the exact same time, together, in a spirit of unity and a spirit of collaboration. And I think we have a time such as this right now to seize upon where we are, to do all of those things together well. And with that comprehensive approach, I think that we will be able to make the difference. Back in the time of the Boston Miracle, we were heard to be said time and time again that faith without works is dead. The same holds true now. We have faith that we will continue to move forward, that we will continue to pray for the peace and prosperity of this city, and in fact reach that peace and prosperity, but we will do that by working together collaboratively. I am so excited and encouraged by the partnerships that we have with the school, with the mayor's office, with the police commissioner, and with our faith-based partners, and with so many other people in our community. Together we will make a difference. Together we will move forward to hope for a better and brighter day. It's really good to see you all today. We had a very productive meeting, a lot of transparency and truth and honesty in there. That's what's wanted and needed, and it's a good thing. Thank you.
So I want to first of all say, certainly recently there's been what seemingly is an uptick in crime, but we want to send our condolences certainly to the victims and their families, and to certainly the homicides that have happened recently. Today's meeting was tremendous in the sense that you hear me talk about community policing a lot in building trust. Well, the city is coming together as we should, and as we have in the past, to deal with crime and fear of crime. And so I think today was just a commitment from a lot of different people, from faith leaders, certainly from schools, now the city itself, and the mayor who certainly has made this a priority to make sure that we're doing all we can to keep people safe. The police always have a role. We have a lane, so to speak, and we're always going to do what we can to proactively do all that we can to prevent things through visibility. But the fact is that we need support and help, because these issues are far bigger than traditional law enforcement. And today's meeting, emphasized and talked about a lot of those things and the different roles that different people can play. So I was encouraged by it, and hopefully, as we go forward, we'll continue these conversations on ways to build a safer city.
Good afternoon. I was very appreciative of the opportunity to come together today. It felt incredibly supportive to have our mayor and our city agencies, our faith-based community, state elected officials all together talking about how we can support and curb the kind of violence that's happening in our community and in our schools that impacts our youth. You know, we hold 49,000 students every day in the Boston Public Schools, and they're impacted, whether that violence happens in a school or whether it happens on their way to school or on the front steps of their school or at their home. And so it's pivotal that we all come together, and this space gave us the opportunity to do that, to continue conversations that we've begun, and I'm very optimistic about that. I know for our schools, a big piece for us is to make sure that the mental health supports for our students and our families, our restorative justice, our social workers are all activated within our schools, and certainly that, as I think I've said before, due to the pandemic, we've had a number of our students drop out. If you know an 18 or a 17-year-old that's not in school, or a 21-year-old that's not in school and didn't finish, please have them call our re-engagement center so we can get them connected. We have to have the opportunity to give our young people who were not able to finish during the pandemic a plan, skills, a job, a diploma. And these are the ways that the media can help, our public can help. We'll be starting a re-engagement campaign around this. Chronic absenteeism is another. Our students need to be in school. That's where they're safest. That's where they'll learn. That's where they're meant to be. And so we'll be working on this as well, having a lot of door knocking events, going out into the community, talking, home visitations, talking with parents and students who aren't coming to school on a regular basis. These are all things that we'll be folding out in support with our partners in the days to come. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I'm Russell Holmes. I have the honor of representing parts of Mattapan, Dorchester, Hyde Park, Rosendale, and JP. You actually are standing in the heart of my district. And my biggest takeaway, of course, is not that this is the responsibility of all the people who are here. My biggest takeaway is that this is the responsibility of our community. I actually believe that when I look around, there's not a single one of us who are gang involved. There's not a single one of us that you see here who I think is an impact player. And so we have to, as a community, own it. And I don't think folks like the commissioner or the DA is going to come into my community and save it. I don't think that's their role. So I just think what I heard and continue to hear is that we as a community have to stand up, make the hard decisions of whether or not we're going to, as some folks say, snitch or not. But violence is something that we have unfortunately gotten too comfortable with in the neighborhood as something that is going to happen. And I appreciate the DA and I appreciate the commissioner, the mayor, and everyone else who's here. But my takeaway is and I heard from the community, let's lean on the community, let's get to the community's resources, let's get all of the folks the things that they need from our communities that include housing, as I'm sure they've talked about, but then we need to get all of the wraparound services for our community, because it's not typically that someone just shows up and says, hey, here's our problem, and all of a sudden I picked up a gun. I literally was in prisons twice today, and both conversations I heard clearly from some of the impact players who are in prison. They literally were saying this is not the life that they want, and unfortunately, they're unlike when I was younger. New Jack City was like they made an awful lot of money on the street. That's not what I'm hearing they're doing now. They're actually fighting about things about what street is the right street to shoot over and who's going to represent what area. And so I think these problems are solvable. And for whatever reason, we think that they're not. And so my takeaway is just simply, let's get them the resources they need. Let's continue to be active, but let us as a community own this and not put this on politicians, because I really don't believe politicians are our answers to this problem. Thanks. And I'll take any questions, Steve, or anything else you have later.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Kendra Lara, and I am the district counselor for District 6, which is Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury, and Eggleston Square. And I think similar to what all my colleagues shared, what I heard from the community today, and what my hope is that is all of our collective takeaway is that this is going to take all of us, and that the issue of violence does not happen overnight. Young people do not wake up one day and decide to be violent. It is something that takes time, and it's something that if you go into a school and speak to a teacher, they will be able to tell you what they saw in that young person and where that young person was struggling. It's a thing that you can go into a middle school and see the young person that is struggling there, and you can track from beginning to end. And so I think that it is our responsibility when we think about local government to make sure that the ecosystem that creates safety in communities is strong. And that means that our neighborhoods are strong, that people can afford where they live, that one job is enough, and that our schools are places where young people are going to learn and to be supportive. There was a comment that was made by a Boston Police Department officer that said that we often focus on the young person, but we don't focus on taking care of families. And as local government, it is our job to take care of our families. And so although, like Rep. Holmes said, this is not a problem that all of us politicians can solve because, none of us would consider ourselves to be impact players. There is a job to do for our local government, and there is a job to do for the clergy, and there is a job to do for the schools, and there is a job to do for parents and nonprofit organizations, and every single person that lives in a neighborhood has a job to do. We need to start making our communities and other people's children and our own children our business, and I think that we're ready to do that work. Thank you.
Questions?
Are there any plans to get some of these impact players, as you refer, into a room together and maybe get a dialogue going at that level?
So the city's violence intervention and prevention efforts have a long legacy of work in this space happening with community partners through the Boston Public Health Commission, through the street outreach program that is currently being revamped. The goal is that every agency will identify where they have a space for that. Some of that work happening through the Boston Public Schools, some of that work happening in partnership with the Boston Housing Authority, and then some that is taking place through our community organizations who are closest to the ground, have their ears to the street, and know and have relationships to be able to convene conversations like that. So that work, in many cases, is already happening. And there were programs similar to that had taken place over the summer with a particular focus on entrepreneurship for young people and creating economic opportunities and pathways to jobs and educational supports. That work is a key part of this ecosystem, as the council referred to as well.
The programs that you just described mirror a lot of what you talked about. I remember when the Plan for a Safe Summer was first introduced. If those are things that are already going on and we're still seeing these challenges, what do you envision doing differently to really make an impact right now?
Yeah, so I think, if okay, and I know the superintendent will step in and offer corrections, but I think some of the places where there's some really tangible examples happen in the structures and supports that are working through our Boston Public Schools. We have recently been reinvigorating a task force that had fallen off over the course of the pandemic, a group that meets representing probably a dozen or more city agencies, from human services and public health and neighborhood trauma teams to Office of Housing and public safety and BPD, and of course multiple agencies within BPS, to go student by student and really understand where are school transfers happening? What are the planning mechanisms to support that particular school, to make contact with the young person and their family when they're entering a new situation, to know the connections and relationships and needs of each of our families as they are moving around within the school district. Much of that had been, frankly, displaced by a focus on pandemic kind of, survival for families and for educators and within that space. And so that is now full throttle ahead, even in response to some of the incidents that happened this past weekend. The fact that that group had been convened now and the lists and the muscle memory from how agencies fit together and build that ecosystem, we were able to have a very immediate response to identifying some of the young people who might have been related to or impacted by incidents, even if they were not directly present, and to be able to then provide supports in different school communities. And so we are really just trying to layer in support after support and tie this into how we're planning for all of the other city resources that require funding and staffing. the goal is to break down even more silos and be able to pull it together. I think we saw some tremendous progress over the summer. We hit an all-time high for youth summer jobs participation. More than 4,500 young people participated in the youth summer jobs program, which had plateaued at about 3,500 young people in previous years. And so our push to double the number of slots and really ensure that they could simplify the process to apply and get into those jobs did make an impact with that kind of big growth there. Those were for summer programs that ended when the summer ended. We also saw our Neighborhood Ambassadors program really bring in a number of incredibly talented, passionate, community-connected individuals into this city ecosystem of how we do this work in community, and those helping build that pipeline that can then address staffing shortages in our various public health and public safety and BPS roles has been a key step forward for us in just the last couple months as well.
Hold on, can I just address something to the state level? So, Steve, what I can just say is to your question about impact players, I was in the prison earlier today and with an impact player one-on-one, and he was saying to me that we have to have it so that the people who are having these interactions with all of the impact players, they trust. And so we're going through a new process in the city, how they're doing it, but I can tell you at the state level, we have been adamant that, hey, there were some folks who were not happy with Shannon Grant, said, hey, we don't like that the police get all the money. Then they were not happy with SSYI. Then they were not happy with gang violence. So in every way, we're trying our best to get the money to the nonprofits and away from city and nonprofits to actually hire people who are actually doing the work. There are literally some folks who are running organizations who used to be impact players and who are on the streets now running those organizations, and I think that's important because they have to be people that they trust. And the second thing is, I can tell you, I started my morning this morning with Under Secretary Peck on the phone with something he called credible messengers, people who's been out of prison, who are out for like a year or so. We're hiring folks, giving them real jobs, $85,000 a year type jobs, to say, we want you to be out as a credible messenger saying something that's very important. The street has lied to me. And I hear that often. The street lied to these folks when they were saying this is the way to live. And so we're doing it not only at the city level, but at the state level as well.
Question for the mayor or the DA or the police commissioner. We've heard phrases like an uptick, a surge in violence. As you reflect on the meeting today, do you have a sense of what accounts for that and an action plan going forward for next weekend, et cetera?
So I'll just add a tiny bit of framing, and then the commissioner has thought about this very deeply. We are building off of decades of partnership in the city of Boston, and that has resulted in, over the last few years especially, a very clear reduction year after year after year in crime, in violent crime and community violence, in shootings. And this year to date, we continue to see those numbers below last year, although any single incident is extremely impactful and devastating in our communities. And we know that some of the more recent trends that are very troubling involve younger people, our young people having more access to weapons and being involved with more of the gun incidents in the streets as well. And so BPD and the commissioner have looked very carefully at those trends and are just want to make sure we get that sort of overall context set as well. But I'll turn it over to the commissioner on recent incidents.
No, and just to build on what the mayor is saying, we have had historic, positive rates around involving crime, and we're continuing in that fashion in some way, shape, or form. But the negative trends that we are seeing, this is more real than perceived, is, the violence that we are seeing now is that kids are younger, right? There's a lot more youth involved in the level of crimes that we're seeing. Our shootings are actually down. They're not up, they're actually down, but the reality is there's a lot more younger people under 18 doing this stuff. And so that's a negative trend that we like to address, and and that's the uptick that you might be referring to more so than anything else. So.
Last question, and I want to make sure, Councilor Lara,
Thank you. And so I wanted to share a little bit more just about the messaging around the uptick in violence, because I think it's important in terms of framing. And Commissioner Cox, with your permission, I would like to quote you. One of the things that Commissioner Cox has been saying is that we're not only responding to violence, we're also responding to the fear of violence at the same time. And so when I earlier mentioned that this is all of our responsibility and that we have to respond to this as an ecosystem, I wanted to say, because we're at a press avail, that also includes you, to the press and the media. It is also your responsibility to not only cover instances of violence with care with our communities, but it's also your responsibility to make sure that you're not waiting until young people are being shot or until young people are being dead to cover what is happening in these communities. There is an incredible amount of nonprofit organizations that are doing an incredible amount of work. There are an incredible amount of young people who used to be impact players who have transformed their life and are giving so much back to the city of Boston. And failure to cover that with the care feeds into this fear of violence, and sometimes the notion that there is an uptick, and sometimes the notion that things are more dangerous or more violent than they actually are. And so I wanted to step up and make sure that I extended that invitation out to you as well, because it's not just the people who come in direct contact with young people in the city of Boston. It's also how particularly communities of color are being covered by the media. And so you also have a responsibility into the culture of fear and how we either support that, nurture it, or make sure that we're telling thoughtful, accurate stories about these neighborhoods.
Last question.
Each of you has come forward to say that this was a productive meeting. And just for the people who are watching live, you know, we are interacting with people in these neighborhoods just like you are, and it's good that this was a foundational meeting. But what is your message to the people watching who say, it's great this was a productive meeting, but we need help right now? Like, we're afraid right now. What is your response?
Yeah. We did make sure that there's information among various groups that are on the ground every single day, 24 hours a day. There are hotlines that are available to report information that you may have. There are there's availability and resource if there is a particular event that community members believe it would be helpful to have more visibility and presence of Boston Police to reach out. And so we're trying to spread that word. And then just to know that in this moment, there is a tremendous amount of work happening to ensure accountability in each incident, to have the investigations result in very immediate results. It's been remarkable, actually, how quickly some of these situations have ended up with accountability attached to a particular incident of violence, and that most of all, this is not the beginning and end of the conversation. This is a starting point that all of us representing various platforms, whether it's an organization, a particular district and community, or a faith community and congregation, are now taking ownership and responsibility to say we are now taking the next step to get the word out and pass on that information and invite in all of the community members to further conversation to come. And so you'll see that happening through the Boston Public Health Commission as they launch some of the particular trauma response and kind of evaluation of how the city's trauma response happens through a series of community conversations that are going to take place. You'll see that happening through the new our new chief of behavioral health launching strategies for particularly focused on young people and mental health in young people and how everyone can plug into that through the superintendent and ways in which the Boston Public Schools will continue to have these conversations. But I think in terms of the most immediate, right, it is Halloween coming up on Monday. We know it's going to be a weekend where a lot of folks will be out and about and, crossing the street and wearing all the costumes, and so we want to just encourage everyone to be in touch with your neighbors, with community organizations, with others who are providing programming. Plug into that. If you want to make a big difference in safety in your community, invest in a local neighborhood organization that is doing incredible work right now, I guarantee you, and is stretched thin. A group that takes care of a park or is focused on providing food at a local food pantry, or all of these efforts are public safety efforts. It provides that sense of who belongs in a community, who has access to the resources that they need. And so there are lots of ways for everyone to get involved, and we're eager to make sure that we can keep this conversation going today.
All right, thank you. We have to free up this space. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cox, do you give us an update on the shooting at Charles County?